next speaker is going to talk about drilling activity and production results on a Cherokee platform here in northeast Oklahoma. And this is going to be Blue Jacket Energy. And our next guest is Shane Matson, manager of Blue Jacket Energy.
Like Dr. Clark, I'm on day 7 of feeling like death, but I think the steroids I'm on is finally my grounds. Right. Got it. Excuse me. Thank you to the Osage Minerals Council for extending an invitation to present at the 15th Annual Energy Summit. This has been the 6th summit I've participated in as a speaker, and I always enjoy it. It's nice to see such a big audience out here, despite the last couple of years we've been through in the industry. $50 sure feels a whole lot better than $27 in February of this year. I'm going to talk a little bit about production in the Cherokee platform. All the producers in the area understand the geological province I'm speaking of. It's basically northern Oklahoma on into southern and southeastern Kansas. We're going to start with production. We're going to look at Oklahoma production, Osage County specific challenges in Oklahoma associated with production data. There's a speaker from IHS later in the afternoon. One of the sessions that will be talking a little bit about this. I think we can give you a bit of insight into it from a producer standpoint. Drilling activity and production statistics on a database of around 500 wells that we recently gained access to, horizontal wells that were drilled in the last four years. And then some regulatory challenges that we all face in this country, in this state, and then in this county specific. So with that, that really didn't come out very well. This is the current rig count taken from Baker Hughes. What we have here are December of 13, December of 14, December of 15, and December of 16. This is the rig count for all of the continental United States. And this is the rig count for the state of Oklahoma. So you can see we went from a peak of 1,837, and we're down around 567 rigs in the state, in the United States working. And in the state of Oklahoma, we currently have 81 rigs working. Most of them are working in the scoop play, the stack, the merge between, and then the lower Osage play out in Judy County. These are some world-class wells being drilled out there right now at $750 oil. The right side of my graph has been cut off. This is daily oil production for the state of Oklahoma going back to the early 80s. And you can see that we hit a low there in the mid-2000s, and we've steadily been increasing production. Production fell here at the end of 14, but it's actually back up to about where it was at that point. Looking at just annual production for September over the last 4 years, the state of Oklahoma was producing a little over 300,000 barrels of oil a day back in 2013, which was up several hundred thousand barrels a day, or 100,000 barrels a day up from sort of the flat line. And we're currently sitting at 414,000 barrels a day. What's remarkable about that is that despite the low price, through engineering efficiencies and better stimulation design, we're getting more product out of the wells that we're drilling. So the wells drilled today are considerably better, sometimes by a factor of 3, over the wells that were drilled just as recently as 2013 and 14. The revolution has been learning how to get liquid oil to be produced out of very tight rock. The first phase of the horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracture stimulation was on gas wells. We learned from 2003 to 2007 how to get gas to flow out of shales. But it's taken us about 7 years to figure out how to get liquid to flow out of very, what we'll just call ultra-tight formations. The scoop was nearly a failure until they began modifying their stimulation design. And what you're seeing in the stack today, say in pounds of sand per linear foot of well drilled. So that's roughly 5 million pounds of sand. And the most important component to the design change isn't just pumping sand, because you can pump all the sand you want. It's the mechanical connectivity between the wellbore and the formation. So the stimulation, or the cluster design and the stimulation is where the real revolution is happening today. A single side note, I have children in public school, and everybody in here has read what sort of a bad state they're in right now. And our gross production tax on horizontal wells is at 1.5%. And the big oil companies in Oklahoma City fought like heck to keep it at 1.5%, whereas many of the oil companies in Tulsa, including George Kaiser, were pushing for a 4.5% for the horizontal drilling. Harold Hamm said nobody would drill any wells if the tax rate increased. He said this at $100 barrel oil. He was still drilling horizontal wells in Oklahoma at $27 oil. So the only thing that will fix the state budget is an increase in the state budget for education, is an increase in that horizontal tax drilling. We are giving it away. Here's the production in Osage County from monthly production from June of 2014 through September of this year. I'm sorry, through July of this year. That's the latest date that I had. Total gross production is here in red, with a peak out here in 14 and almost 14,000 barrels of oil per day, which had come up 4,000 barrels almost, and currently somewhere around I think 12,000, 13,000 is what I've got there. Is that right? That's right. It's 11,500 barrels a day. And this represents the North Burbank unit, which is one of the largest CO2 floods in the world, I think, certainly the continental United States. The North Burbank unit back in June of 14 was making about 900 barrels a day. And in September, through personal communication, I learned they had peaks of over 3,000 barrels a day. So a significant increase from 900 to 3,000 barrels a day. If you back that out, the non-CO2 production has fallen from about 9,000 barrels to around 7,000 barrels. It's about a 4,000 barrel loss over this period of time. A lot of that is just from, well, there's a lot of reasons to it. I won't go into it. Oil wells completed in Osage over the last 40 years. We had a peak of drilling back around the time that the 1979 EA was published at 600 wells per year. I can't imagine how busy this county was, and I can't imagine, I was 3. I can't imagine how busy the county was and how loud it must have been with all of this activity. Our peak here of recent time of my career was here around a little over 200 wells. I remember that time well. The BIA Osage agency was a fine-tuned machine. They were working with a chronically underfunded budget and limited staff, but they were getting permits out in good time. They were following, at that point, many of them were still doing their own archaeological surveys, the BIA coming out and doing that. It was really something to see. Currently, the number of completed wells, and this is coming from IHS, so it's only as good as the data that I get, is in the low teens, which is a trend that is bucking the trend outside of the state. Now, there are geological implications for that. We don't have a volatile oil window in the Woodford here, or a Merrimachian shale, but there is clearly plenty of oil in the ground, and the only way to get it is to increase this number. Challenges in quality of data, and this is probably one of the more interesting things I've been involved in. Back in 2010, we recognized that IHS production for oil wells, particularly horizontal oil wells, was being underreported as we were getting it from IHS. And we knew this from a well in Pawnee County drilled by Pablo Energy, that it made about 50,000 barrels of oil in the first 12 months, and IHS showed that it had made 5,000 barrels of oil. We brought this to IHS's attention. Turns out a lot of people had. And they got to working on it. This was 6 years ago this month. And the problem is very complicated, and it is ongoing, and it is snowballing. Multiple services, so this is how it starts. The Oklahoma Tax Commission knows how much oil has been produced, we think. And then they convey that information to various companies that then bundle it up and sell it to industry. IHS is the service that we subscribe to. Companies pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for this data. There's a breakdown at the OTC level. They're behind, and what they're putting in is incorrect, and sometimes they go back and recorrect 6 months ago and change the volumes all over again. It's not IHS's fault. It is actually on the producer's side in many cases, and the inefficiency of once you get behind a problem, it's sometimes hard to simply catch up. It's nearly impossible to evaluate production data in the state of Oklahoma. Unless you are the operator of the well, or a working interest owner in the well, or a royalty owner in the well, you do not have access to accurate, reliable data, which makes it challenging to figure out how much oil is actually going to be produced this year, has been produced this year, say from horizontal wells that are paying 1.5% tax rate. I'm beginning to think that there's a little bit of collusion from the larger producers to keep this as murky as possible so that we don't realize how much we're literally giving away. So we obtained operator-sourced data for 400, almost 500 horizontal wells drilled in northern Oklahoma between 2011 and 2015. And we took that production data, all fluids, oil, gas, and water, and we compared that data. We loaded the data into Spotfire, and we loaded IHS data into Spotfire. We did a comparison on a cum oil and on a month-by-month basis. And what we found were large discrepancies. What we have here is the difference in, this is the cum oil from the operator that is sourced. So this well shows that it made 19,900 and, I'm sorry, here's the operator. Let me get this right. Yeah, here's the operator cum oil, and here's the IHS cum oil. So this is what the operator shows. This is what the state, the Oklahoma Tax Corporation, shows. The oil, this well produced 32,700 barrels. The Oklahoma Tax Corporation shows that it made 11,700 barrels for a difference of 19,000 barrels. That's 19,000 barrels missing. If you're going to evaluate this asset and say, maybe I want to get into this play, and you had access only to the data supplied by the Oklahoma Tax Corporation, you'd never get into this. You look at this and say, this well's a dog, right? Well, maybe if you knew it had made 31,000 over 2 years instead of 11,000, your opinion would change. So we have some that have almost 100% missing, some with fairly small variance of 1% or less, and sort of this median variance of 23%. And this is systemic across it. By and large, OTC reports less oil than the operator does. In very few cases does the operator actually show that it made less than the state shows. We were missing in one subset of this almost 1.5 million barrels of oil at the IHS level, which is a significant amount of oil in 3 years. Now, we presume taxes have been paid on it. It's just a function of the OTC getting the information out. So that was on a cum basis. This is all actually on a month-to-month basis. So we have month 1 here, month 2, on 3. And you can see the data is pretty good. Blue means that the operator data is greater than the tax data, OTC data, and red means OTC is greater than the operator data. And things start to get a little crazy here in June of 2013, and then they just fall to pieces here in May of 14. I mean, the whole thing goes red. And curiously, in April of 15, we don't know if this is related to tax day, everything is right for that particular month, and then it goes to heck again. So the problems are big. IHS has dedicated significant manpower and dollars to this problem, but is not making much of a headway. And I think that there's probably some political reasons why that our children are paying the price for it. Okay, so moving on to that's just data. I'm happy to visit with anybody about that after the show. We took 3 operators from our 500 well database, and we had all this data in Spotfire, and we basically ranked it. We ranked it on oil produced in 24 months. So not EUR over out 50 years or 30 years. This is how much crude oil was produced by this well, not BOE, there's no gas component to it, just black oil. And we ranked it from low to high. And so the wells over here are your best performing, and the wells over here are your worst performing. And these are your formation types. We've got Woodford Mississippian combos, Woodford Hunton combos, Woodford Mississippian, Leighton Oswego. There's just one or two of those. Hunton Mississippian Oswego, that's a very strange commingling, and then Hunton horizontal. And you can see on this axis, which is our cumulative oil, we start at 0 barrels, and we go up to 110,000 barrels. So there's a pretty good cluster of wells here that have made 50,000 barrels of oil in the first 24 months of production, which is really what a producer is concerned about. I don't care about what the EUR is. I want to know how soon am I going to get paid back on my investment. And a fairly good spatial distribution. What you'll see as I break this into producer type, so this is the same thing I just showed. Here we go, operator A, and I apologize, I had to scrub all the well names off of this, so it's kind of ugly. It's a lot of copy-paste of text boxes. Operator A had most of their wells in the lowest performing part of the spatial distribution. A couple of good wells here at 80,000 barrels to 60, but a lot down here at sub 10,000 barrels. And, you know, if you can't make 10,000 barrels of oil in the first 2 years, it's a slow dry hole. And everybody that produces oil here knows what a slow dry hole feels like. Here's operator B. Again, a little bit better distribution over here, but still sort of off to the low end of the production. But some standouts out here at 80,000 barrels out of the Mississippian, 60, 70. And here's operator C, who tested Woodford, Mississippian, and Hunton. And this operator did very well. And I mean, everything, the bulk of their wells are in the top 40 percentile of the data distribution. So the next question we ask ourselves is, well, why is that? And what we have been looking at is actually the stimulation design. What I spoke of earlier was the mechanical connectivity between the wellbore and the rock itself. And Company C had a radically different stimulation design than companies A and B. And there were more perforations per cluster, more clusters, or not more clusters per stage, but shorter stage lengths. And I think the results are pretty encouraging. So regulatory environment, everybody's seen this map, or at least parts of it. This was after the Pawnee County earthquake, Labor Day weekend this year. And we made a little poster here. The little dots here are every earthquake published to the directory between January of 2009 and September 6th of this year, September 2016. And this graph here is a frequency and magnitude plot. So what we're looking at, there's no magnitude, it's just frequency. And what you're seeing here is an overall frequency increasing and peaking here in October of 15 and on a general trend down. And I believe the Oklahoma Geological Survey, which is the source of this graph, will say the same. The overall frequency of the events are going down. The events are migrating in space. They've moved into Pawnee County and around Cushing along these well-established, well-known tectonic lineaments. They were mapped by the OGS in the early 20s. But the overall frequency of the smaller events is decreasing. So we're looking at this simply from a curiosity standpoint. We're tracking the data, and what's interesting is that the seismic, the beginning of the seismicity started in Prague in 2011, and that area just lit up for several years, but has since become quiet, and it looks like these swarms are moving in space, and they will go away at some point. One of the problems that I think most of the producers understand here is that by and large, we've not moved a lot of water in this part of the world. The Mississippi line, while it seemed to start at big volumes, 4,000 to 5,000 barrels of fluid a day, most of the wells in Pawnee and Payne County ended up 3 years later producing 400 barrels of total fluid. So it's not the big wet Mississippian that you have in some other parts of the state. Pawnee Mashing Field, which really started the dewatering process, moved 800 million barrels of water over a 10-year period into 4 disposal wells 4 miles east of where the Pawnee earthquake happened, and there was no increase in seismicity. So the comment that Dr. Clark made is that it's not the disposing into the R bucket. It is more likely the rate and the volume that it's happening all over the place. It used to be just in a very few geographic areas. So conclusions, Drilling activity is increasing in Oklahoma. State production has increased 100,000 barrels a day since September of 13, which is driven entirely by horizontal drilling. The vertical wells that have drilled out there are a drop in the bucket for this 100,000 barrels a day. State production has stayed flat through the downturn. Significant increase in performance through better stimulation, that is the mantra. Osage County non-CO2 production has decreased 30% since July of 2014. Accurate oil production is not available across the state of Oklahoma. Decisions that we make in industry for investments are constrained by the data. Osage County has its own problem with data that we can all reminisce about about the good old days at lunch. Horizontal drilling in the Cherokee platform has exhibited a high range of results. A lot bad, well actually that's not true, some bad and some good, some in the middle. But all of these wells were drilled before 2014. And the revolution on horizontal stimulation happened at the downturn. It forced the engineers to begin thinking about what the rock is and not treating it like they thought it was. Regulatory risk is high. The Cherokee platform risk being having the entire mineral estate condemned through regulatory process. We've known this is true in Osage, that it's sensitive to, investment is sensitive to risk. And when you can't weight the risk of regulatory burden, it slows your investment flow in. It slows the amount of money that's interested in a particular area. And between the OCC and the EPA, right now we are all outside of Osage, is where I'm speaking of here. We don't know what the next shoe is going to be that steps down on us. We just know that there's one coming. The OCC has said as much. In Osage, the risk can be elevated because of the VIA's seemingly endless changes. Scott Descharmes has truly championed a path forward, and if you follow that, it will work. He's absolutely right. You can get a lease. It may be challenged. Likely will be challenged. You can get a permit to drill. It's not easy. It's nothing like it was a few years ago. It takes a lot of time to get through. And you can get a permit to work over fairly quickly. To Scott and his team, you guys have just done a great job. I think everybody in here knows that. Thank you. The ABB is our Achilles heel. Scott said that we've got a season between the end of May and the beginning of September. Well, really, our season is really like the end of July to the beginning of September. We don't have enough time in the day to get into that. But the American burying beetle is definitively our Achilles heel. Everything else is difficult, but if we can't get a permit to drill say I've got an idea in December, right now. It used to be that within 60 days I could have a permit to drill, maybe be drilling by March. It's not that easy. I'm more looking like drilling in September of next year, and that just is a tough way to go. I think there are solutions, and hopefully we will see them happen. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Questions?
Hi, Jack. Am I on video? Okay. Is anybody in here drilling in Osage County today? I'm not. I don't know. Nobody in here, but this isn't by any means everybody. Do you know? You're welcome. I didn't realize the press was going to be here. Yes. I would wear a tie. Did you find one? Yeah, I'm not the expert on that. Last year, Andy, what's Andy's last name? Is an expert. This, as Fred Storr put it out, the OPA, the Osage Producers Association, had hydration engineering do a report on this for us, and part of the EIS, response to the EIS. And one of Fred's comments was, had we known now what we know about the ABB when it was listed, likely upon the passenger pigeon. And when the passenger pigeon went extinct, it was severely stressed because it was specialized. I'm sure it also depended on all the other animals that were affiliated with the millions of buffalo that roam the area. But I think about 30% of the surveys come back positive. I'm looking at Scott, and about 30%. I mean, we did a survey on a well location, on the gravel pad, and had a beetle there. So there's a lot of expertise in that, and if you have any questions, the OPA has a booth over here with Marcy manning the booth, and we can point you in the direction to get expert opinion. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you,